Welcome to Pensar Basketball. We are live. We are talking about Christian Koloko, potentially the Shams bomb that kept us up all night. Right before it was going to bed, got the news. Christian Koloko gearing up for an NBA return, probably the Lakers. Of course, in the footnote is, the Clippers and the Spurs and the Raptors are also in the running, but ultimately it's probably going to be the Lakers. And Shams wouldn't run with it if it wasn't something to run with. So we got to talk about it. We got to talk about Christian Koloko and why he would pick the Lakers. What obligation does he have to the Toronto Raptors? And we also got to talk about DeMar DeRozan and his crazy comments about Kawhi Leonard, the 2019 championship. And it didn't make sense the first time he said it, didn't make sense the second time he said it. And it certainly is not going to start making sense the 55th time he says it. So let's address it. Let's talk about the gap between DeMar and Kawhi and why I believe that DeMar DeRozan is wrong when he says that the Toronto Raptors would have won a championship with him or without him. Completely disagree with that. So first, let's tackle this Christian Koloko news. Shams reports that Christian Koloko is about to get clearance from the NBA and that he is eligible right now to sign a deal and that he is looking at the Los Angeles Lakers, who suddenly have a ton of minutes available. Christian Wood, another Christian that they have, is on the docket and is on the mend, right? Christian Wood is on the mend, and ultimately that frees up a ton of minutes. And Koloko is a guy who, when he came to the United States, that's sort of his stomping ground, right? I believe he went to Sierra Canyon, then he went to Arizona. His trainer is, I believe, 32 minutes north of LA. And he's obviously spent a lot of time with him since he was drafted till now, and obviously with his rehab. So that's also it. Now, look, as Toronto Raptor fans, obviously, we're gearing up for Christian Koloko. We love Christian Koloko around here. We want Christian Koloko back on the Toronto Raptors. It would be great. There's plenty of opportunity for him here as well. It's not like Jakob Poeltl is a staple for the future. If Christian Koloko works out and if he's healthy, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Raptors dangling Jakob Poeltl to the highest bidder. So I understand it. Also, gotta say, I'm not going to judge Christian Koloko, whatever he does. I'm going to support him the same way he supported Jeff Doughton, the same way he supported OG Anunoby. This is unconditional. What he went through over the last year, to imagine this from the human side. I know that sometimes as basketball fans, we only look at our team and we only think about the bottom line, but think about the human line of this. This is a player who came from his home country of Cameroon, came to the United States, played high school ball, got better every year, went to Arizona, became a second round pick, played for the Raptors for 1 year. Then he had this huge health concern, and he was on track to have a monster second year last year, in my opinion. His development over the summer was incredible. His shot was looking really good. I saw some clips of him in the gym prior to the start of season. And also, let's not even forget that he is a sponge. He is a late development prospect who would have finally had Jama Malalela and Darko Rajakovic. I can't even imagine how different last season would have been with Christian Koloko. So of course it's appealing to think about what life could be with Christian Koloko going forward. But in the end, blood clots are a scary thing. They have ended many careers. And so, as a Raptor fan, as a Christian Koloko fan, if you have ever been a fan of Christian Koloko, I think the right thing to do in this case is to be happy for him no matter what he chooses. It's worth noting there are plenty of reasons to choose LA. First, it's a bigger market. It's a huge market. They're on national television. You're playing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. You're probably going to learn a lot. Playing with two really great players like that, you're probably going to learn a lot. You're playing with Anthony Davis, who's one of the top 3 centers in the NBA. Right now, for my money, him, Jokic, Embiid. That's it. Like, conversation can start after that, but those are the 3 guys. You can talk about Jaren Jackson. You can talk about Victor Wembanyama. You can talk about those guys, and maybe Wemby climbs that list. But at worst, you're playing with a top 5 center and one of the 5 greatest players, 3 greatest players, 2 greatest players of all time in LeBron James, who's going to really speed up your development. I think he's going to get you the easiest looks you've ever seen in your entire life. And going from playing with Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet in his rookie season to playing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, this is a massive jump up for my money. So there's one side of it. The exposure element, not only experiential exposure, as in playing with the greatest players you've ever played with in your life, and what a dream that would be for a kid from Cameroon to suddenly be in the same locker room as LeBron James. Be honest. If you're not from Toronto, just be honest with yourself. It's an appealing pitch. The second thing, of course, the exposure to the national audience, actually being in front of people, being on a team that has a chance to make the playoffs. I'm not saying the Raptors don't have a chance to make the playoffs. I'm just saying the chances are longer, and the fall off of being on a lottery team that's tanking for you're never going to be on you're not going to be on a tanking team in LA. Like, they're not tanking unless they trade LeBron James. They're not tanking. There's also the opportunity element here. Now, people would say, "Hey, man, there's plenty of opportunity in Toronto. Jakob Poeltl's not a staple. Kelly Olynyk's not a center. Ulrich Shamshay is not ready. Nothing but opportunity for Christian Koloko right now." However, not necessarily true. Okay, there are some minutes here that are up for debate. Ulrich Shamshay will come quickly and come fast. Maybe by the end of the season, we're looking at him as the center of the future. We don't know that, right? Koloko and Ulrich are very close, very familiar. He would know probably better than most, like, how good Ulrich is going to be. The other element of this is Jakob Poeltl is definitively going to be the starter for this team. They're not moving Christian Koloko into the starting spot anytime soon. And so it's not like the Raptors are pitching a radically different opportunity than the Lakers. It's not like, hey, come be our franchise center of the future. We're going to pay you a max contract, etc. No, it is ultimately the same thing. So there's different ways to look at this. The third thing, of course, that you could say that the Lakers can offer is we don't know. We don't know what the monetary and years element of this. And this is where I say, hold on. If you're a Raptor fan, the Raptors still have a chance. The Raptors do have a chance here because the Raptors have more money than the Lakers right now. If the Raptors really wanted to, they could dip into their mid-level exception to sign him. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not wrong. The Raptors have nothing but flexibility for exactly a situation like this. And maybe it was for exactly this situation that they saved all that money for. Because wait, I forgot there was a connection. Clutch. Clutch, LA. Let's talk about that. But that connection is there. If Christian Koloko is going to the Lakers, it's clear, Rich Paul and Clutch are going to push him there. They're going to say it's for your branding. There's off-court branding deals that are available to him probably in LA that wouldn't be as available here. Maybe ads, maybe access to Hollywood. We don't know. Maybe a movie role. We don't know what the Lakers are able to offer under the counter, but there's a lot. And there's a lot of benefits to playing in the second biggest market in North America with the most marketable athlete probably the last 25 years. The Raptors side of this is interesting because the Toronto Raptors can not only pitch a similar opportunity in terms of, minutes and opportunity and role and function, but they can also offer more money. And this, I think, may be sort of the reason why the Lakers are potentially being used as leverage. Because one thing that we know is that Rich Paul and LeBron James and the Lakers are in bed together. We know that Clutch Sports and the Lakers have many overlaps. And so if the Raptors, and I'm not suggesting the Raptors have ever done poorly by Christian Koloko or would do wrong by him, but maybe there's some sense in the Raptors side of, hey, this guy's a risk. Let's be honest. He's cleared today. 3 months from now, his career might be over. Both sides accept the risks here, right? This is a blood clot situation. Just because they work through it and because the medicine or whatever the process has been to heal this does not mean that it can't come back. People relapse. People have issues. So if this is an issue that could become a recurring issue, if the Raptors are not as high on Christian Koloko as perhaps I am, or perhaps some Raptor fans are, could the Raptors be pitching a similar deal to Christian Koloko as they pitched to Bruno Fernando? Consider what I'm talking about here. Bruno Fernando has signed a $2.4 million deal, which becomes guaranteed on the first day of the season, which means that if the Raptors cut him in training camp, he gets his zilch. I believe there's like some sort of partial guarantee that'll count towards their eventual cap space, but that money is not guaranteed unless he makes the team. And he has accepted that risk because ultimately he sees an opportunity here. So what if they're giving something similar to Christian Koloko, a 1-year deal, a partial guarantee, a series of clauses? Well, if you're Christian Koloko, you got to look at this and say, that's not very secure. He's a very young player. He's made, very little amount of money. When you consider agent fees, taxes, etc., the money that he's made so far to become an NBA player for 2 years, 1 year on, 1 year off, half a year in the G League, this isn't life-changing money that he's made. The life-changing money will come later if he continues to be healthy and continues to progress. So what if you're his representation and his camp right now, you're looking for some sort of sense of security and commitment from the Raptors too. The Raptors actually should be the front runners to get him. They know him best. They have a relationship. He already has a relationship with the coaching staff that's already there. They worked with him for half the season. There should be a ton of advantages that the Raptors can leverage to their advantage to get him. But I think it's going to come down to dollars and cents. And so therein lies the question. If all other things are equal and the Lakers are able to offer him a better branding opportunity, a more exposure opportunity, equivalent playing time, then how are you as the Toronto Raptors going to up the ante and make it a no-brainer for him to sign with the Raptors? Well, you can do one of a few things. Number one, you can give him years, so you can give him term. You can give him a 3-year contract or something. Give him like 3 years, 10 million or something like that. Just call it a day, right? You don't have a lot of long-term contracts on your books. But then you accept the risk that if this whole thing goes sideways in 3 months, now you're on the hook for $10 million and 3 years. Or you can give him a guaranteed contract for like a shorter term, like a 1+1. But then again, you will not be able to sell him on we want to retain control because ultimately the health scare is real. It's real for him, it's real for you. So if you're the Toronto Raptors, I think there's a few ways you can play this. And one of the ways that you should play this, if I was the Raptors, what I would do is I would sign him for 2 years, 8 million. I would offer him 2-year, 8 million, or I would offer him a 2+1, and maybe there's like a partial guarantee, or because I don't know what the insurance elements of this is. How much will insurance cover? Will insurance cover it if he has to medically retire, etc.? But it's always complicated with players like this. Like, people don't want to accept it. With the Chris Bosh situation, there's so many different risk factors here. There's the risk factor of relapse. There's the risk factor of like a massive PR and ethical calamity, which is a player passing out on the court or something like that. So I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen. What I'm saying is, if you're the Toronto Raptors, this is not a cut and dry situation as if he was just healthy and, he's recovering from an elbow injury. This goes beyond that. This is something you can't always see. This is something you're going to have to monitor. And this is something, quite frankly, if you're Christian Koloko's camp or you're the Raptors or whoever, if you're a Koloko fan, you're going to have to pray on, and I think if you're the Toronto Raptors, this is leverage, right? The Spurs have opportunity, right? They have a young team. They're going to be on national television a lot. The Clippers maybe aren't going to be on national TV as much. If it matters to be if exposure matters to Christian Koloko, this is going to be the last spot he's going to look. If familiarity and development matters, that's how I would pitch it if I was the Raptors. If you want to be a great player in 5 years, no team is going to do a better job of developing you than the Spurs or the Raptors. Of the 4 teams that are being rumored, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Raptors, the Spurs, you're going to play with the best players in LA, or with either Kawhi when he's playing, and James Harden. So you're going to play with 2 icons probably that you looked up to, or you're going to play with Anthony Davis. And okay, so that's the Anthony Davis and LeBron James. So you got that's the pitch for LA. You get to live in La La Land. We don't know if Christian Koloko loves hot weather. We don't know that about him, but maybe he does. Why wouldn't a kid from Cameroon who went to high school in California, who trains in California, not love hot weather? Who doesn't love hot weather? Shit. Like, I don't understand why Raptor fans get so sensitive about it. It is a colder climate. Chicago's a colder climate. New York's a colder climate. Deal with it. Boston's colder. But if he appreciates playing with stars and playing in a warm climate and playing close to his home base of his trainer, and he wants to be in cahoots with his agency, and he wants to do what the agent wants, then probably he goes that way. If he wants to lean for familiarity, if he cares about long-term development, if he cares about, being with an organization that has a good track record, frankly, of doing players right and not dealing them to crappy situations, then, the Raptors are a good choice. But ultimately, the Raptors are going to up their offer. So that's sort of where I land on the Christian Koloko thing. Personally, I'm just happy to see him happy and healthy. I want him to see him playing basketball. It's going to sting if you're a Toronto Raptor fan and you're watching, 27, 28-year-old, Jakob Pertl, and, 25-year-old Brandon Carlson, and, is still admittedly very raw and not super ready, Ulrich Shamshay, and a not center like Kelly Olynyk, and you're going to probably be complaining about the fact that we don't have a young up and coming rim protector. And then if Christian Koloko works out in LA, you're going to be watching a guy blocking 2, 3, 4 shots on your fantasy team, and you're going to be like, oh my God, that was our guy. But I'll remind you, regardless of how this turns out, there are no obvious answers. That's what I'll say. If the Raptors sign him for 2 years, $8 million, and he ends up being a medical risk, within 3 months and having to retire, you'll probably say they shouldn't have taken the risk. If they don't offer him that kind of money and he signs for a minimum with LA and he thrives, you'll probably say the Raptors are idiots. They should have offered him more. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Me personally, I would sign him for the 2, 8 plus 1, and I would just live with the risk. It's a high risk, high reward situation. But I honestly, at 4 million, it's probably low risk, high reward. I think he's worth it. I was on a Twitter space, Raptor space on Twitter with Zazu earlier, like 20 minutes ago, and we were talking about all the young players on the Raptors, like Jamal Shed and Jonathan Mobo and all these guys. And I posed the question, I was like, would you trade an Ochai Abaji right now for Christian Koloko? And I think most people would say yes. You know, so he is a young player of high consequence. He's a young player that has a great relationship with Scotty Barnes. And, of the players that he played with in his rookie season, a lot of them are gone. So maybe some of the familiarity, the coach that he came up with, the coach that gave him the opportunity to start is gone in Philly, right? So really, what's remaining? What's left? Of the players he really played with, it's just Scotty. Who else is left? Scotty? That's it. He didn't play with Grady. He didn't play with Manuel quickly. He didn't play with RJ Barrett. He was waived before those guys came on. So that's my point. It's like the familiarity angle is he really hasn't like been coached by Darko. Like he's been developed a little bit by Darko and Jama. But you have to remember the Raptors changed their entire coaching staff. They've changed pretty much their entire roster with the exception of Chris Boucher and Scotty Barnes. Like everyone else is pretty much gone, right? Am I mistaken? That's pretty much it, right? That's who's left. Gary's gone, Siakam's gone, OG's gone, Precious is gone. All these guys are really close to Christian. So if you're gonna sit there and judge this kid and be like, oh, why wouldn't he come home? What home? Home's been destroyed. It's a completely different home. So I hope that his relationship with Scotty and the brief foray that he got into working with Darko and Jama is enough for him as a player to say, I trust this. Not to mention relationship with Masai. Masai, obviously has a good relationship with him, picked him with the, 33rd pick. Maybe there's some unfinished business element of, hey, these guys drafted me. I saw my vision here. I have some unfinished business, health complication. I want to go there. Will they do right with me by the will they do right by me with the offer? Okay, now we're going to talk about this DeMar DeRozan and hold on, let's see here. Lance Scott saying sign him. He's the guy we wanted. Bueno Kitty saying, no mistake, I want CK here, but yeah, it's still roll the dice. I'd take him, but if he goes to LA, I support him. That's the healthy perspective. I love this community for that. It is a healthy perspective. This is basketball, but this is bigger than basketball. Like this is a career threatening. If one of you who are not basketball players, professional basketball players, had the same issue that he had, I think you would consider it very differently. So ultimately, yes, he's a 7-footer, and yes, he is playing on your favorite basketball team for your favorite basketball league. But ultimately, he's a human being with a family and a big family that he wants to support. He has big visions. He worked very hard for this. He's worked for years for this. So, if LA is going to give him the opportunity to get the exposure and the security and the development that he needs, then I'm going to support him. And if that's what his agent and his trainer and he believe to be true, but Rich Paul has a great relationship with Masai Ujiri. I'll tell you that. He's not if Masai Ujiri sits Rich Paul down and says, "Listen, bring this guy to us, give him 1+1. We'll take care of him with a $20 million contract next offseason." Easy. Easy peasy because Rich Paul's a business guy. He's not going to send Christian Koloko to the capped, to the and it's not like the Lakers have ample cap space. They're right on the threshold. They're not going to be able to offer him a considerable amount of money. They're not the most stable organization. We don't know how long LeBron's going to be there. It's not like Rich Paul's like, oh my God, the Lakers are the dream opportunity. I think it's just leverage. Nameless saying any team would have released him so he can be closer to a group of practitioners to help him. Total BS if he leaves. Okay. Slim Creeper saying DeMar is delusional. Okay, so here's the thing. DeMar DeRozan, man, just in the last live, I was saying that I wanted DeMar DeRozan to have his jersey retired. That I said it was Vince that I wanted to have the first jersey, number 15 goes up. Then I want number 7 to go up in the rafters. But then after that, I posed the question to the audience, to the chat, who would you guys have as the third number to go up? And while some of you lost your minds and said some other names, most of you had the right answer when you said number 10, DeMar DeRozan. DeRozan did a lot of good stuff here. I think he was a part of some of the best Raptor moments. He was a part of some deep playoff runs, not something that the Toronto Raptors had become accustomed to in the years prior to DeRozan. So I want to show y'all something, which is the record. So this is 2008, 2009, right? That's the year before DeMar DeRozan and the Raptors were 33 and 49. They end up with the ninth pick and they end up picking DeMar DeRozan. And this was in the same draft, if you recall, as Steph Curry, James Harden, Tyreek Evans, Blake Griffin, a lot of really good players in that draft. But me personally, I was rooting for DeMar. I wanted DeMar. That was my guy. Every year, every year I have this thing where I play 2K and I simulate out like a couple years, especially back then when I was really into video games. And man, I got to tell you, I was drafting DeMar to the Raptors in 2007. I was watching his Compton High mixtapes and I was like, "Oh my god, wouldn't it be so nice if back then NBADraft.com or NBADraft.net had player comparison DeMar DeRozan." You know what the comparison was? Vince Carter. And honestly, if you watched DeMar at Compton High, you could really see some of that Vince Carter stuff. He had like that midi pull, the step back, the athleticism. Wasn't quite the athlete Vince was, but a hell of an athlete. And I was like, man, paired with Chris Bosh and Andrea Bargnani, this would be great. And of course, initially it wasn't. It wasn't. The Raptors, they go 40 and 42. And then the next year it's calamity, right? Chris Bosh leaves, right? 40 and 42 under Jay Triano, right? And then Chris Bosh leaves. He goes to Miami. That's the decision off season, and the Raptors suddenly just fall off. 18 win decline. DeMar DeRozan is the face of the franchise or the future of the franchise alongside Andrea Bargnani. It's just sort of this directionless, weird time in Raptors history. We're not really sure what's going on. And then we get into 2011, 2012, and then it's another, really terrible losing season, 23 and 43. I guess it was lockout shortened season. And then we had a 34 and 48 season. So like entire, DeMar like growing up was a lot of losing, right? So to anyone who thinks, "Oh my god, if you lose early, you're going to doomed to lose forever." No, DeMar did a lot of winning after he did a lot of losing. He got that brief little, window into success. You could almost say his career to date mirrors Scotty Barnes a little bit in Toronto, right? A little bit of success, make the playoffs in your first year, don't make the playoffs in your second year. Of course, Scotty has had a lot more success than DeMar, but that being said, 4 years into DeMar's career, it did not look like DeMar DeRozan was destined to be a top 4, top 5 player. I think it's worth noting that Kawhi Leonard was drafted after DeMar DeRozan. It's also worth noting that Kawhi Leonard, by his fourth season, had already won a Finals MVP. To put things into perspective, Kawhi Leonard and DeMar DeRozan has never been a conversation until they were traded for each other. No person in the history of the world has ever compared these two players and said, "Yeah, they're pretty similar." It wasn't like Russell Westbrook and James Harden. It wasn't like LeBron James and Kevin Durant. It wasn't even like it wasn't like yeah, I'm not really sure how many different examples I can come up with, but what I'm trying to say is these are not players in the same tier. It's like saying Pascal Siakam is like LeBron James. No one has ever said that prior to me just saying that right now. This is not a conversation we've ever had. Pascal Siakam and Julius Randle is a conversation we've had. Pascal Siakam and Jared Allen is a conversation we've had, maybe, Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes is a conversation we've had. These are conversations where we're comparing like things, right? I don't think anyone in their right mind has ever compared these two players. So when the Toronto Raptors traded for damaged good Kawhi Leonard, it was after a lot of success in Toronto. And that is where I think you need to pay DeMar DeRozan his kudos. From 2013, which was really the start of We the North, a season which started out disastrously, 6 and 12, if I'm not mistaken, the Rudy Gay trade, the subsequent Kyle Lowry trade that wasn't, and then the inevitable DeMar DeRozan wants to get traded, but didn't quite get traded. That whole thing happened in 2013, 2014. Do you realize what a run the Raptors had to go on to correct themselves from 6 and 12 to finish 48 and 34? It was really the start of something brilliant. And he was a part of that. But let's not forget that in no year ever in Raptors history has DeMar DeRozan led the Raptors in win shares. Figure it out. I'm not kidding. These are, since DeMar's draft year, here are the players that have led the Raptors in win shares. I'm not kidding. This is a crazy, crazy, and no, this does not dismiss win shares as a metric. It's a very coherent metric. Chris Bosh, Amir Johnson, Jose Calderon, Amir Johnson again, Kyle Lowry, Jonas Valanciunas, Kyle Lowry, Kyle Lowry, Kyle Lowry, Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry, Chris Boucher, Siakam, Barnes. And this year, without even looking, I can guarantee you it will be Scotty again. The point here is that at no point, regardless of how the marketing was done, regardless of how All-Star voting was done, regardless of how All-NBA voting was done, was DeMar DeRozan the best player on the Toronto Raptors. At no point was he even remotely the best player on the Raptors. I think at some point you could have said it was close between him and Kyle, but it wasn't that close. I think it's worth noting that the year that Kawhi was here, he played very few games. Like, he played 60 games that year, and he had 9.5 win shares. The gap between Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard was greater than the gap between Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan to the other side. What I'm saying is Kawhi Leonard, the year he was here, was a top 3 player in the NBA. DeMar DeRozan, at his absolute apex, has been a top 25 player in the NBA. Not a top 25 offensive player. He's been a top 15 offensive player in the NBA. Lack of threes notwithstanding, sometimes inefficiency notwithstanding, too many mid-range shots notwithstanding. These things all count. They matter. Longevity notwithstanding, continuity notwithstanding. DeMar's been a fantastic player. His evolving playmaking that really, really picked up in San Antonio was not necessarily a part of his game here. But even had it been a part of his game here, let's say I take all of the brilliant playmaking that DeMar developed under Greg Popovich, and I put it into him in 2017, 2018. It doesn't change the factor for the Raptors at all. It does not change it doesn't change the reality, because the reality is the gap between Kawhi Leonard and DeMar DeRozan is just not about numbers. It's not about, at least it's not about the numbers that the casual fan cares about. Because if you look at their career numbers, honestly, it's remarkably similar. I mean, let's not even factor in that DeMar has been way, way, way healthier, way more available, has played way more games. If you look at their career next to each other, you would be tricked into thinking, and which is why I don't like these historical comparisons that only lean on numbers, that these are similar players. 20 years from now, a kid who's born today is going to look up these two players, having never watched them play, and say, 20 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists versus 20 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. These were similar players. They were pretty close. Yeah, sure, one of them won 2 finals MVPs. But I mean, they both made similar number of all-star teams. These are not comparable players. These are not similar players. The only thing that's similar about them is where they score from. What's not similar is everything else. Yes, you can seamlessly fit Kawhi Leonard or DeMar DeRozan into the other person's spot on the court. You can put them into pinch post. You can run the same sets for them. They both need very similar players around them. But the gap between these two players in terms of efficiency, pressure that they put on the rim, their finishing talent, their ability to score over a double team or a triple team, their overall like gravity on the court, like how much help Kawhi Leonard sucks up. And then let's not even talk about the defensive gap, because the defensive gap is even like the offensive gap is like 30%. Like, when you take into the increased 3-point shooting percentages, better, getting to the line is DeMar DeRozan, of course. Like, DeMar is a free throw merchant, right? But Kawhi's ability to finish from the most efficient zones on the court makes him, I want to say, at least 25 to 30% better as an offensive player. It's not one of those things where we're comparing Draymond Green to an offense-only player and we're saying, what do you care about more, offense or defense? No. If Kawhi Leonard did not play any defense whatsoever, he would still be a better player than DeMar DeRozan. If Kawhi Leonard stopped guarding, if Kawhi Leonard 2017 to 2019, which is the player that we're going to actually talk about here, if that guy simply stood around like Luka Doncic on defense and DeMar DeRozan tried his best on defense, Kawhi's still a better player. because of that 30% gap on offense. And DeMar is a poor defender. He's gotten slightly better. He's had seasons where he's been slightly below mediocre and awful as a defender. Positional versatility is not even close. DeMar can guard at best one position. If he's on a good day, he can guard that one position, which is usually small forward. Guards give him trouble, lateral quickness. Bigs give him trouble, lack of size. Not a good paint protector, not a great team defender. DeMar's just not a good defender. And that's never been an athleticism issue. That's a focus issue. That's a wingspan issue. Maybe that's a lateral quickness issue. I have no idea what DeMar DeRozan's weaknesses were on defense. Unlike Vince Carter, who had every tool in the world to be the greatest defender, I don't think DeMar DeRozan necessarily has the tools to be the greatest defender. I think he could have been capable, but he's always carried such a large load on offense that maybe no one's really cared too much that he's not the greatest defender. And now he's on the Sacramento Kings, who are just not a very good defensive team, and he's not going to help that. And Malik Monk, sorry, I might be clipping out there. There's some internet issues. My bad. I apologize if I'm lagging there. The point here is the Toronto Raptors had a considerable amount of success with DeMar DeRozan. Considerable amount. They made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. They made it then 2 times to the Eastern Conference semifinals. They did, however, get bounced in the first round. They got bounced in the first round against the Nets. Then they lost in the Eastern Conference first round, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, against the Washington Wizards the year after We the North started. So they got swept by Otto Porter, Bradley Beal, John Wall, those cats. Then they got to the conference finals. Then they got to the conference semis, and then they won. Now, the narrative that DeMar DeRozan has always spewed, I don't want to use the word spewed because it has a negative connotation. I really like the guy, but I just want to speak honestly about this. This conversation was always, we couldn't get past this one guy. Not true. It's not true. Okay, first of all, a lot of teams couldn't get past that one guy. You're just one of them. But that one guy also proceeded, by the way, to lose a bunch in the finals. So why are we acting like LeBron James? And again, this is where, maybe there's a comment that DeMar once made of, if we had LeBron, and I think it's the worst moment of his career for me. And he said, if we had LeBron, we'd win too. This glorification of LeBron James, this, oh, he's so great. Oh my God, he's Michael Jordan. No. No, 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 no. I never heard, Charles Barkley talk about Michael Jordan that way. If we had Michael Jordan, my sons would win too. This beta weirdo energy only came in the Big Three era, the team up AAU culture era. You're supposed to want to beat them. And the problem is, there's this old quote. I think it is, the body does what the mind thinks, or the body can only achieve what the mind believes. So in the end, if you walk into a series thinking you can't get past this guy, and you're the leader of the team, and you're like the leading scorer, and you're the guy that I'm putting the ball in your hands, and you already have this belief, this negative belief that this guy is so great that you can't get past him, well, no wonder you lost. Because you know who had no problem getting past LeBron James multiple times? Kawhi Leonard. You know who had no issues guarding? And by the way, in his prime, LeBron James with the Miami Heat. You know who had no problem putting that guy in a friggin' box? As a third-year player, I believe, with the San Antonio Spurs when he won Finals MVP? Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard built different. Mentally built different. And basketball is at least 75% mental. So I'm not talking about the defense yet, because the defensive gap is so enormous that I could literally write a book about it. I'm not even talking about the offensive gap. Focus in on the mental gap between these two players. Kawhi Leonard went to the Los Angeles Clippers, spurning, like basically saying, I'm not going on the Lakers because I'm not going to be on LeBron's team and I'm not going to be LeBron's second option. I'm better than LeBron. I'm not going to be his second option. And then had New Balance create an ad where he has the king, the car. Y'all remember the ad? It was basically a troll on LeBron James. Kawhi Leonard doesn't have a buddy bone in his body. He didn't have that. He wanted a supporting cast. He didn't say like, "Oh, I want to be on the same team as LeBron James." He said, "I want Paul George to be my help. I want the third runner up for MVP to be my help." Was his notion. It was his thought process. Kawhi's like a king cobra. He eats other snakes. He's a snake eater. That's what Kawhi is. Not scared of anybody. And if you listen to Pascal Siakam or Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry or OG Anunoby or any player who played with Kawhi that one year, and you listen to them talk about what the biggest influence of Kawhi was, even listen to Nick Nurse. What was the big difference is the belief shifted. Your entire belief structure shifted when this guy came in the door because you suddenly believed that you had that guy. And that's the truth. The Raptors did not believe they could beat LeBron James. Had they had Kawhi Leonard and LeBron James had stayed in the East, I don't know if they would have beaten the Cavs. I don't know that. What I do know is they would have believed they could beat the Cavs. For the first time in a long time, they would have walked into a series against LeBron James and said, "We have one. You have one, we have one." That was never going to change with DeMar DeRozan. It was never going to change. And it wasn't going to change with Pascal Siakam either. Just an FYI. When you see a Scotty Barnes go up against a Kevin Durant and he looks like he wants to snatch his heart out, that's not fear. That's because he believes he's better than him. Rookie Scotty Barnes snatching the ball away from Kevin Durant and running it down on his neck. Second year Scotty Barnes going up against Giannis Antetokounmpo in the midst of a really admittedly terrible season and going back and back and back at him and Brooke Lopez and scoring and screaming at their faces. Rookie Scotty Barnes nearly putting up a triple-double against Joel Embiid. What this guy has shown you so far is the same stuff that Kawhi Leonard is built. It's the same thing that Scotty Barnes is built of, which is no fear. Scotty Barnes is a snake eater. Scotty Barnes is the type of guy who go into a series against LeBron James and say, "Who's LeBron James?" I'll tell you right now, there's one thing that I know Scotty Barnes is never going to say. "Oh, we would have won if we had Wemby too. We would have won if we had Anthony Edwards too." He's never going to say that because that's not how he thinks. And because that's not how he thinks, he will actually have a chance against those players. It is important that your leader believes that you have a chance. This is not Wu Wei. Any situation, I promise you, if you walk into a job interview thinking you don't deserve that job, you will not get that job. It's just life. This is how it works. Your beliefs structure your reality. And if your beliefs are, we cannot beat LeBron James, when you are existing on that team is putting that team into doubt. You leading that team is putting it to severe doubt. It's not like Dwayne Casey was going to counteract that. You needed a killer, and you got one in Kawhi. Let's talk about the difference between these two players, because it is enormous. These are the two players, the year before they got traded and the year they got traded. So Kawhi, this is, the 7 games or so that he played in San Antonio. Again, if you just look at points, rebounds, and assists, you can kind of sell yourself on these players being somewhat similar. Maybe even if you look at the steals and the blocks, because Kawhi is not like a steals and blocks merchant. He's just a great defender. You'd be like, oh, field goal percentage, 3%. 3% is not a big deal. 3-point percentage, 8%. I mean, that's a pretty big deal, I guess. 3% for the free throw line, effective field goal percentage, 6% gap in effective field goal percentage. I guess that's pretty big. But the box plus minus 7.5 versus 2. But this is regular season. Do me a favor when you have some time and look at Kawhi Leonard's playoffs. That's where these two players really, really differentiate. Because if the gap between them as regular season players is like, let me use 2K ratings for a second here. Let's say, and I'm going to use fair 2K ratings. I'm not using the bullshit 2K ratings that 2K comes out with every single year where half the league is 90 and 85. If DeMar DeRozan is a 79 in the regular season and Kawhi Leonard's an 89 in the regular season, and you're like, that's not that far off. In the playoffs, Kawhi is basically 100 and DeMar is basically a 75. The gap is so enormous, it's not even worth mentioning. Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs is a better player than Kobe Bryant. Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs is a better player than Luka Doncic. Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs might be one of the 5 to 7 greatest players of all time. I did not stutter. We are talking about a guy, we always talk about playoff Jimmy, playoff Jimmy, playoff Jimmy. Kawhi's better than that guy. Kawhi is considerably better than that guy. And a lot of people are going to look at the fact that Kawhi, in LA hasn't had success, hasn't gotten out, they did have some success. But I mean, they haven't really won a championship in LA. They had Paul George, etc. So, he didn't really make a big difference. If you watched the Raptors versus the Sixers, man, you should know. The Raptors are not getting out of that series without Kawhi Leonard. It's just not happening. His defense is incredible. His shot making, his volume, the pressure he puts on the rim, it was incredible. And the fact that he was willing to stare down Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler, and Joel Embiid, a star-studded team if I ever saw one, with Tobias Harris, and just say, I'm better than these guys, that's confidence. Then you go up against the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis Antetokounmpo. You go down 2-0, which would be a death sentence for most teams. You're down 2-0 against the team that's favored to beat you, and then you come back and reverse sweep them 4-2. What changed? According to Nick Nurse, the story is Kawhi Leonard walked into the locker room and said, I'm guarding Giannis. DeMar DeRozan not doing that because DeMar DeRozan can't guard Giannis. I don't think DeMar DeRozan can guard Thanasis. I'm not hating. I'm stating. I'm telling you the truth. If you watch DeMar DeRozan try to guard Tristan Thompson in the post, okay? You've watched this shit as long as I have. You watched DeMar DeRozan get lost on every fucking screen. You've watched it. You've watched him get lost in transition. You've seen him have lazy closeouts. You've seen him not be able to guard a corpse in the post. You understand that he cannot guard a pick and roll. He always goes under. I know that DeMar DeRozan means well. I know that DeMar DeRozan means a lot to the Toronto Raptors. I know that DeMar DeRozan probably is one of the very most confident players and, the hardest working player. I have nothing but respect for DeMar DeRozan. I respect the fact that a player can be so good at 28 and somehow be better at 30 and then somehow be better at 32. That's not how this usually goes. Most players are done by 28 because they don't work like DeMar. I love the fact that he stuck around in Toronto. I love that he said, I am Toronto. I love all of that. Why wash all of this good stuff out with this negative shit you're doing now? It took a while. Like, according to DeMar DeRozan, the quote was, it took a while for me to be okay or to be happy with the Raptors championship. Why? Those are your brothers. Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby. These are the guys that you were with. You should be happy for them. I understand that there's a professional pride and an ego. Like, I'm the guy. Maybe a lot of this is created by the media. Because it was the media, ultimately, that created this. They moved on from DeMar and they finally won, which is tough for DeMar. He's not the only reason. They also replaced Jonas Valanciunas with a considerable upgrade in Marc Gasol. And if you want my honest opinion, they probably don't win a championship without Marc Gasol either. Because as much as I think that they needed Kawhi Leonard to get through Philly, I know they definitely needed Marc Gasol to get through Philly. So a lot of things had to go right. There had to be complete buy-in. Kyle Lowry had to get over his feelings. OG Anunoby had to be perfectly okay with being a bench player. Pascal Siakam had to be okay taking a back seat in the offense. The team itself had to come together and be okay with the fact that their best player was getting very preferential treatment in an organization where stars didn't get preferential treatment. And they also had to be okay with a first-time head coach replacing a coach that they had gone through many wins with, right? They had to accept a new system. They had to accept that Danny Green was going to start. All of this. By the way, I don't think they win without Danny Green. I think Danny Green is super underrated. They needed the whole team to win. But the idea that if we simply swapped DeMar DeRozan for Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs that year, forget the regular season. Regular season, no problem. Oh yeah, you could win all those games. So what? The Raptors won consider this. The Raptors won 59 games the year before Kawhi. They won 58 games with him. And the year after, that was the COVID shortened season, they were on pace for 60. So it's not absurd to say the Raptors would be a better regular season team without Kawhi. They literally replaced Kawhi Leonard with Stanley Johnson and got better. This is not a stretch at all. What is crazy to say is that in the playoffs, in the thick of things, in the fourth quarter, when it came down to stopping a Giannis, stopping an Embiid, making a game winner of epic proportions, bounce, 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 bounce. How many times did it bounce? The idea that I could simply replace a generational performer, a generational, one of the 5-10 greatest playoff performers of all time in Kawhi Leonard, and replace him with a notorious defensive liability, playoff choker, sort of, sometimes, checkered history in the playoffs. Let's say, I don't want to throw playoff choker on DeMar, but checkered history in the playoffs. Lesser efficiency player that I could simply swap those two out and the results would be the same? Hell no. The results would not be the same. The idea that the results would be the same is an affront and frankly an insult to the Toronto Raptors, and I will not stand for it. It's simply wrong. It's logically deficient, and ultimately the same media, the same national media, local media that created the entire negative movement against DeMar, like DeMar was the problem the whole time, they are the same people egging him on right now saying, do you think it would have been different? What do you want the guy to say? What do you want him to say? You want him to say, nah, Kawhi's way better than me. We would have never won with me. This is crazy. He's not going to say anything else. And of course, DeMar's a proud guy. Comes from Compton, comes from LA. He's a basketball player. He's a jock. Of course, he's a very proud guy. He's not going to say, I refuse to answer this question, because that will seem weak. He believes he's a great player. He is a great player. He's not Kawhi. He is not Kawhi. This is like discussing the difference between Anthony Edwards and Nikola Jokic. Yeah, Anthony Edwards is great. He's not Nikola Jokic. It's like discussing Tyrese Halliburton versus Magic Johnson. And by the way, those players are closer than Kawhi and DeMar were. Is that rude to say? It's not rude to say. DeMar is not top chop liver. DeMar will probably be a Hall of Famer. Marginally, I'm pretty confident he's going to be a Hall of Famer. No championships. Probably won't win a championship in Sacramento, but he's probably going to be at least borderline Hall of Famer. DeMar DeRozan has had a career similar to a Mitch Richmond. I think you could put it up there, like a Mitch Richmond type of career. It's a good career. It's a great career. It's a career that all young players should be happy to have. It's a career that's better than 99% of all NBA careers, and it's nothing to sneeze at. All the personal demons, all the mental health issues, all the family issues, all the health issues, all the personal tragedies in his life, where he's come from, how hard he's worked. This wasn't supposed to be easy. It's been great. What he did in Toronto, what he started in Toronto, the We the North, the memories, these things can last forever. They don't need to be tainted by the what-ifism of, well, I was just as good as Kawhi. We just couldn't get past the Lakers. That's a lie. And I've not known DeMar DeRozan to lie. So obviously, if he's saying this, he believes it to be true. And I hope after listening to this video, if someone ever forwards this to him, I hope that I've made a coherent case to that it's just simply not true. It's simply not true. Defense wins championships. Efficiency wins championships. Positional versatility wins championships. I'm basically defining Kawhi Leonard. Superstars win championships. DeMar DeRozan not a superstar. He's a star. He's an all-star. At his absolute apex, he was an all-NBA guy. Was he ever a top 15 player? Whew, your guess is as good as mine, but my honest opinion, no. DeMar clipped as the 21st to 22nd best player in the league. He clipped almost exactly the same mark as Pascal Siakam, except, by the way, y'all know that I love DeMar DeRozan. Y'all know that I'm not super fanatic about Pascal Siakam. I'll say this. Pascal, at his absolute apex, was marginally better than DeMar DeRozan. Fact. He was a marginally better player than DeMar DeRozan at his apex because of the defense, because of the size and versatility. Pascal Siakam peaked higher than DeRozan. He probably won't peak longer, but he peaked just a little bit higher. And Siakam and Kawhi Leonard was never a conversation. So DeMar DeRozan and Kawhi Leonard is absolutely no conversation. Okay, let's get some comments. We got 57 comments. I haven't been looking at this. Rue saying his actions are one of a child throwing a tantrum. Fair, fair. And as someone who, I myself am pretty emotionally stunted in certain ways. I can definitely trace back to childhood triggers and childhood experiences for that. I do think a lot of emotional trauma and stuff can make people, you know, reactionary in probably the wrong ways. And I to DeMar DeRozan, I just hope he stops taking the bait because these news people, these media people, they're not your friends, bro. They're not your friends. That they're not doing you any favors by asking you this question over and over. And they've asked it many years, right? Do you still have a relationship with Masai? Are you still mad at the Raptors? They just want to print the quote. They want to print the quote. DeMar DeRozan believes nothing happened so that all Raptor fans can say he's crazy and all NBA, Kawhi haters can say, yeah, he's right. And this is just, it's farming for engagement. It's a stupid conversation. We'll never know what happened. But honestly, if you wanted to take an educated guess, I think we can all I'll tell you right now, if DeMar DeRozan was on that team, you don't get past Philly. You don't get past Philly. Gasol, Gasol, no Gasol, Danny Green, no Danny Green. The difference in that, DeMar and Kawhi is you don't win game 7. It's simple. So if you don't get past Philly, that means you don't even get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Lance Scott saying, not trying to be rude, and I'm sure the weight of the load was incredibly heavy, but DeMar's mental health was leading to our playoff losses. I don't know if that's true. I really don't. I mean, you'd have to ask DeMar about that. And I think you may, it's crazy how often we are so quick, I myself included, are so quick to diagnose people with personality disorders and mental health issues, then we have never even met them. So what I will say is that things burn both ways. Sometimes we can maybe criticize someone for having a particular issue that makes them prickly or hard to deal with, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, etc., right? But the same thing that makes them difficult to deal with is also what makes them great. We don't know, right? And what Rob said, if we had LeBron, we would win too. That's the saddest sucker thing to say as a leader. It's a really defeating comment, for your own team to hear you say that and then be like, okay, guys, let's go again. And even when the trade happened, when he was interviewed about it, his story hasn't changed. DeMar isn't changing the story. He's had the same story for 4 years now. When he was asked about the trade initially, he said there was one guy we couldn't get through in LeBron, and he went to LA. So I thought we were going to get a chance. So now the question then becomes, that's the story you're sticking to because you lost to DeMar, or you lost to LeBron a couple of years, but did you not also get swept by John Wall and Bradley Beal? Did you not also lose to the Nets? Right? You lost to Paul Pierce twice, 2 years in a row, right? LeBron James was not on the Nets. LeBron James was not on the Wizards. You lost to those two teams, right? In the first round. So this idea that there was this one guy we couldn't get through, like, yeah, but you never went against Joel Embiid and Philly and Ben Simmons. Like you wouldn't have gotten through that team. You never went against Giannis and the Bucks and that version, the 2018, 2019, the 2019 Bucks were a top 3 title favorite. There were 4 favorites that year. The Raptors had to go through the other 3. The Raptors were one of them. The the Warriors were one of them. The Bucks were one of them. The Sixers were one of them. Those are the 4 favorites. LeBron was not on a championship favorite, and Lord help me, I don't think that LeBron's Cavs had a walk in the park through the East. Had he stayed with the Cavs, I don't think oh, it's like, oh, Kyrie and LeBron are going to walk through, every team in the East. I don't think it was that close. I think LeBron kind of chose his exit wisely when he did. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so anyway, it has been sparse when it comes to Raptors content, right? We haven't had a ton to talk about. There aren't a lot of rumors. Unfortunately, this Christian Koloko rumor kind of comes at a time when we were hoping for some good news about Christian Koloko, and this maybe isn't the news we want. However, I'll reiterate, I'll be happy for him as long as he's healthy. And just because he signs for 1 year in LA does not mean he can't come back to Toronto later. I'll say that too. If he clears the medicals and the Raptors will have some cap space next year, the Lakers will not. Maybe the Raptors can make him a full mid-level offer next year once they see him be healthy with the Lakers. We don't know. Okay, never close the door. The Raptors opened the door with PJ Tucker, then he went overseas. What happened? They brought him back, right? Jakob Poeltl, they traded him away. What happened? He came back. The Raptors are not closed off to this, right? So we'll see. We'll see what happens. One thing is for sure, the Raptors do believe in Christian Koloko. They've spoken glowingly about him. Masai has spoken glowingly about him. So I hope that that situation resolves itself and the Raptors get what they want out of it. I did end up getting a new computer. I don't know if you can tell by the webcam. It's just a little bit clearer. It's not that much clearer. I was working off a 2011 Mac. I'm now working off a 2017 Mac. Unfortunately, I did buy it off Facebook Marketplace, and it did have some issues this morning, right when I was starting this live. That's why I pushed from 12 to 12:10. So I'm really hoping that the guy I purchased it off of, who gave me 2 days to return it, is going to take that, because I've been having some boot issues where basically if it goes to sleep and I try to turn it back on, it's really hit or miss, and I might have to restart it. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to take a risk with this. So that's something. And I am doing the interview with Eric and Catherine. It's been pushed off, pushed off, pushed off, pushed off this weekend, finally getting that out of the way. And if you are curious to hear my thoughts on NBA dunkers, on Jonathan Kuminga, we had a fantastic panel yesterday. I was on the panel both Wednesday when we were talking about the worst number one picks of all time. And then yesterday, we were talking about the greatest dunkers of all time. And yo, you would not believe what happened. My favorite dunker of all time actually reached out to me because of the panel. So I mentioned him, and when I saw the DM, I was just like, "What? This is so cool!" I pretty much idolized this guy growing up, so that was very, very cool for me. It's really nice, you know. I, I don't know. So I was telling my girlfriend about this, and when it happened, and I was having a conversation with the guy, and I was like, if like 14-year-old Rob, who was watching his highlights like on repeat over and over and over again, could know that, you know, 22 years later, he'd be having a conversation with this guy, like, I think he would have fainted. Like, how is that possible? It was super cool. Anyways, so sorry, there is a conversation going on that I am not aware of. AG saying DeMar was nothing special, low tier all-star player who was ass in the playoffs. I'm not really sure he was ass in the playoffs, but he definitely did not rise in the playoffs. Nameless saying, okay. AG saying some fans actually think DeMar's number 10 should hang from the Raptors. LOL. Okay. So we are 1 minute away. So I'll just say I think his number 10 should hang. I think he meant a lot to this organization. I think he started something beautiful. I just wish that he would stop doing what he's doing right now. It's all love for DeMar DeRozan. I love DeMar. I think you don't get We the North without him. His commitment to this franchise, to this city, and to his young teammates. He was a big part of laying the foundation, but ultimately he had to leave to make it go all the way. And now we move on to the next chapter. I hope y'all will like this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Congratulations to this channel, to this community. We got 11,300. We just clipped it yesterday, so that's a moment of celebration. Let's move our way to 12,000 and hopefully get to 20,000 by the end of the year. I'll catch y'all later, and hopefully the next time you hear from me, it'll be because Christian Koloko signed with the Raptors. That would be great. See ya.